and welcome to a new episode on resilience. I'm your host, Muna, the founder of the Grit Makers, and super excited to have fantastic new speakers joining us in today's episode. So, as always, you can say hi to us in the chat, drop to us any hot questions that you didn't get a chance to send me in the DMs. And of course, let us know all your encouraging thoughts for our wonderful speakers who are here today. Thank you guys for joining me. I just want to take 2 minutes for each of you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what's your own personal definition of resilience. And Ivelka, I'm going to start with you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. So I'm Ivelka, and I am the co-founder of Cohesia Connect. So we are a inclusion performance organization encouraging corporates and school environments to consider their inclusion strategies and look at how they can perform. But at large, I'm one that is an advocate for young people and youth. And I think that's all to do with my passion in terms of my upbringing, moving from a small island in the Caribbean, Anguilla, to the UK and navigating my own experiences. So I'm excited to be here and to be alongside these amazing panelists as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm sure they're as excited as me to have you with us. Jonathan, do you want to do us the honor to continue?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jonathan Bannister, and I set up Make Happy, and that's my creativity and innovation consultancy. I think the name says a lot about what we're going to be talking about, and I've called it Make Happy because I once worked for somebody who made me so miserable that I decided to stick that on the wall as a little reminder that I think that work needs to be fun. I mean, I really think we all have to do it, and you want to enjoy it. And I think building resilience is key to understanding that not every job is always going to be fun and games, and that ability to adapt to adversity, to adapt to stress, for me is the essence of resilience. And I hope that with the panelists and Muna, we'll talk about some of the ways you can build that resilience, both in yourself, but within your team and within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. We are here for that. And Dave, last but not least, tell us
Hey,
about
everybody.
you.
Thanks, Mona. Thanks for including me on this, and nice to meet you, Jonathan and Ivelka. My name is Dave Stegert. I am in Frederick, Maryland. I guess I'm the only one stateside, at least from the panelists today. I've spent the last 12 years in B2B sales in a variety of capacities, from business development as a BDX, BDR, account management, new logo sales. And I was most recently at a payments company for SaaS companies, that is, called Paddle, where Mona and I worked together for a bit. And to me, resilience is so universal, right? It's something that it's muscle that we all develop in some way, shape, or form throughout our lives. And it's also incredibly personal. I think how we respond to it, that muscle that we develop, is a unique journey. And to, I guess, kind of define it from my perspective, I think of it as the inner tools that we all use and develop in order to continue moving forward and evolving, whether that be at work, in interpersonal relationships, trying to achieve a specific goal we might have. It's doing all of that and embracing the journey in a way. So that's at least my experience with resilience, and really excited to talk more about it today with y'all.
Thank you. And that's something in previous episodes, we've had also people really circling back to this aspect of moving around gives you the resilience. Ivelka, is that something that you've definitely experienced moving to the UK?
Yeah, I think for me, resilience it connects with my faith aspect because as a Christian woman, I do believe that resilience is connected to our faith and our ability to withstand tough times and understand that there is this period or this season will only strengthen you. And I think my experience, and I talk a lot about my experience moving from the UK from the Caribbean, and that in itself taught me an incredible amount of resilience in navigating a new culture, new food, new society, new way of thinking. Even the way I spoke previously, my accent has completely shifted from when I first moved to the UK. And I think navigating all of those different barriers, and even barriers within the education system and then later in the workplace, I had to find within me that resilience, and I had to find a way to push through the noise, push through the no's and the challenges. But also, quite importantly for me, resilience also taught me to identify the red flags, and be able to acknowledge where they are and learning how to say no in the moment. Because when we are resilient, we think we can conquer the world, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, how that leads to burnout and that element of overworking. But resilience is also that ability to understand within yourself how far you can go. So for me, it's all about believing in myself, having faith that things will get better. These tough times, these tough seasons are only a season and they won't last forever. And my ability to see beyond that and see the bigger picture was really pivotal for me moving to the UK and then navigating in the UK, moving from, one town to another. All of that in a matter of a decade was just incredible in a way. And I think for me, that if I didn't go through that experience, I probably wouldn't be as resilient as I am today. And fortunately, I felt that I've made it out to the other end, and I hope I can be an example of what resilience can teach you to others.
Yeah, it's super powerful because what I love with this introduction is really getting so many different perspectives on resilience, and it is personal. It comes from different angle, and each individual has their own views on it. Now, the way and the reason why I like to start with that is that it's important to understand where we're coming from as individuals, because what resilience is for one is very different to what it can be to the other. So when we have a conversation about a topic, it's great to be able to understand where it's coming from. And I know you guys in the audience, you might have different definitions, and would really strongly encourage you to share them with us. Drop them in the comment. What does resilience mean to you? How do you see it? And perhaps like we can build together like different views and a big map of what resilience can be. I think the importance as well, whether people agree or disagree with what something is defined by someone, I think the importance is to have that psychological safety that is quite key in the workplace. And I think all of you and all of us have experienced different type of environments that led us to be here today to talk about, how we can develop something that can be considered as healthy. Now, I'm super grateful. I had the chance to meet Dave. We worked together for a while, so we did know each other outside of social media. But I'm also grateful that LinkedIn connected me to wonderful new people that I didn't have in my life before, and that's super great. I'm super grateful for you, Ivelka and Jonathan. I think it's been super nice. And I encourage everyone in the audience, just connect with each other, connect with our panelists, and introduce yourself. Tell us what you do. When you add someone from this call, just share your personal definition of resilience with them. See if you have things in common, because that's important, just to give ourselves that grace to learn about each other. Now, getting back into our stories. Ivalka, do you want to develop a little bit more about, when we talk about culture, um, and you're very much involved in that now, especially in the diversity and inclusion space.
Mm.
What got you into this beyond traveling the world? I'm sure there's something we can do.
Yeah, I think when I always tell the story when I moved to the UK, I lost a sense of identity. I didn't know where I fit because the system in the UK was quite challenging in terms of when I moved, it wasn't straightforward, it wasn't easy, and I talk very openly about it. But I think my first instance was understanding that things will never be how I expected it to be in terms of culture. And when you go into different spaces, different environments, you will ultimately encounter a different idea of culture or a different way of how culture is established. And moving to different companies throughout my career, I understand the significance of building a really resilient and healthy culture in the workplace. There were, and I can be very open, there were instances where I was in environments where I was questioned in terms of my tone of voice, in terms of my accent. I was questioned in terms of, my career pathway and if I really wanted to do this or if I really wanted to do that. And it was quite tough because it almost made me think about, am I capable? And it was that moment where I felt like I wasn't as resilient, and I really needed to have the building blocks of a resilient culture, and I just wasn't getting that. And so when going through those experiences, I started to pinpoint kind of bits and bobs of what a healthy culture could look like and what a healthy culture doesn't look like. And then when I spanned into the inclusion world, I realized there is a whole stream of exclusions and barriers and challenges that, different people go through, and not just people of color like myself, but, people who have disabilities, people who are neurodivergent, people who speak a different language. And it was very obvious that cultures weren't, that corporate cultures in particular didn't fully understand the breadth of how a healthy, resilient culture can impact those individual people. And so when I decided to get into the EDI space, it became my mission to not just talk about differences and people being unique, but also talk about how you build a culture around uniqueness, how you build a culture around difference in order for everyone to, have a part or have a voice in any spaces that they encounter. And so a lot of the work and the things that I do is all about building a positive working culture, building a positive, environment that is accepting of different ideas, that is inclusive, and one that wasn't built on exclusion or one that wasn't built on one's biased perspective on what they believe culture is like. And culture is very volatile and it has changed throughout the years. And how do we adapt to the changing environments and changing society to fulfill a really healthy culture? And I think that's a lot of that's what fueled my desire. It's my own personal experience. It's seeing completely different cultures. Living in the Caribbean and living in the UK is completely different. And understanding that difference was so important and so pivotal for me to try and build a bridge amongst all of that.
Yeah, that hits a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. It is also something very interesting. The context in which we see culture does change how we embrace it. For example, when you're looking at um, tackling a new market for someone who is working with different clients all around the world, oh, there we're going to consider uniqueness and we're going to bring it on the table because it's about selling something to someone. But when it comes to taking care of your neighbor that is sat next to you in the office, for those who still have offices, it just becomes an entire story. And to make this life, this office life, or in general, like just life more exciting, it is important to remember to have fun. I think this was definitely something that I appreciated when I got into coaching. Um, Celebrating the differences is a way to have fun as well. Accepting our weird self and accepting the other weird selves around us is really something that is empowering the world in which we live. I have a definition of resilience that's been dropped in the comments, and Julius is sharing his own definition. That is, for him, it's about staying focused on your vision and being flexible enough with the approach to achieving that vision, but staying focused on it. And that's really very much like set your goal and enjoy the journey. And thank you so much, Julius, for sharing your own definition of resilience. Guys, don't hesitate, share them with us. I'll pause along the way and we'll celebrate it.
Mona, I'd like to call out something real quick. I love the operative word in Julius's definition of flexible. I just think that's such a great way to describe or help describe resilience.
Yeah. It's that capacity to expand, really, when you learn that flexibility. But I think we all, do you think of that Huberman podcast episode when he defines like the resilience muscle and how you can like build it up? So for example, with the ice bath and how you can like get yourself to do something. So the more you practice getting out of your comfort zone, the more you develop that resilience muscle that he defines. It was something that stuck with me because ice baths is definitely one thing that I have yet to conquer. I've just tried it again last week. Didn't stay more than 15 seconds, but it was better than the 3 seconds I've done before. So fingers crossed. By the end of my stay in Thailand, I'll be able to stay at least 30 seconds. So when it comes to that, one thing that I didn't think twice about was really creative problem solving. And before I met Jonathan, I don't even know if I knew that terminology. Obviously, I knew of some exercises and different things we could do, but it was really opening up an entire new world for me. So what is so special about instilling change in people with what you're doing, Jonathan?
Good question. It's something I'm totally passionate about because I think when I discovered creative problem solving, but also all the work that had gone behind it, I sat there going, why didn't someone teach this to me at school? And I actually believe that CPS and the one that I teach was developed by Alex Osborne, who was the O of BBDO, the Global Ad Agency. And he, in the run-up to the Second World War, had been really doing a lot of work with brainstorming, this idea of being very deliberate in how you approach divergent thinking. And I don't know how much people know, but during the Second World War, especially looking at bomber crews flying missions, over Europe, there was a huge amount of work done. Why were some crews so much more successful than other crews? And by the way, being successful in the Second World War when you were flying, if you were the RAF, you flew Lancaster bombers, and the RAF flew at night. And if you were American, if you were with the US Air Force, you flew things like the Flying Fortresses, and you flew during the day. A fundamental different approach to problem solving, by the way, both of them with the same aim, but a very different approach. But how crews solved problems, i.e. we've just lost a wing, we've got 3 Messerschmitt night fighters coming at us there, and the whole of the 2nd Battalion of the North Rhine anti-aircraft brigade are just throwing stuff up at us, and we have a very big problem. And some crews reacted in a very different manner to others. And if you haven't had the chance to watch that excellent Apple TV show, Masters of the Air, there is a fantastic scene on one raid where literally you see the co-pilot and the pilot approach problem solving in 2 fundamentally different ways. And out of that came this idea of sort of deliberate creativity. And Ruth Nola, who is, I've got various people who've sort of been transformative in my life and my thinking. And Ruth Nola is an American mathematician. She, one of the first women to serve in US naval intelligence. And again, Dave, you probably know that US naval intelligence had a pretty large failure of intelligence that brought the Americans into the Second World War when they didn't see the fleet, the Japanese fleet, going towards Pearl Harbor. And so she was fascinated with how do we solve problems. And may I draw? I knew I might talk about this, so you're getting me drawing. And she came up with an equation for creativity, and creativity equals, there you go, everybody. Can you see that? Is that actually showing? So creativity, big C. Oh, is it all come through the wrong way around?
Yeah.
How the heck's that happen?
Mirrored.
It's mirrored. It's mirrored because Restream is mirroring on my actual camera. Anyway. Okay. So you can't see it. You'll all have to watch this back in a.
Well, we'll watch it back in a mirror.
The creativity, C, is the function of small a times k times I times e. Now think about this. What I'd like you all to do is, as I talk this through, think about this in terms of building resilience. Yeah, this equation. So K is your knowledge. And it's not just the depth of your knowledge, your speciality. So Dave, it's not just in your case, how good are you at setting up sales, what you know about sort of diversity and bringing different cultures together and creating culture. She also said it was the breadth of your knowledge. And she said the broader your knowledge, the more likely you are to be able to change things. So imagine each of these scores as 0 to 1. And Nola talked about your imagination skills, your divergent thinking. I talk now about divergent thinking, the ability to generate new ideas. And then she talked about E. So it wasn't, you couldn't just have a wall full of Post-it notes. At some stage, you've got to be able to converge, evaluate those ideas and bring them down to one that's going to work for your objectives or whatever. So KIE. And A was your attitude. And remember, she came up with this in the 1950s. And so you can imagine, you probably all know people who bring energy and light to every encounter. And then you also know those people that suck the energy out of everything. Yeah? And so start to think about that. You could have huge amounts of knowledge. You might be brilliant at divergent thinking. Maybe you're less good at convergent thinking, but you are just the most goddamn awful person to be around. And everything is a problem and is negative. It crashes your creativity score down, your C score. But there's something so empowering about Nola's equation, is that the only way C can be 0 is if one of those 4 integers to the right of the equals that none of you could see because you were watching it in a mirror, but one of the has to be 0, which means you have no attitude at all. You've sucked the energy out of every encounter. You've got no knowledge. You've never had an idea, and you've never been able to choose between Coke, Diet Coke. Coke, Diet Coke. Oh, we've all done that. And then what's so empowering is that we can work on those scores throughout our lives. We can move from becoming a yes but person to a yes and person. We can go to a museum and look at an artist that we've never looked at before and go, why did she do that? Or go and see a play and just think about why did they do that and what does that mean. We can learn those process skills to be a better divergent and convergent. And if there's only one thing anyone takes away, we're 25 minutes into this is it. If you want to build in a simple hack resilience, is that when people do that thinking, they never, ever, ever, ever do that thinking at the same time. Yeah. So if you are doing that thinking, anything goes. I mean, within reason. I don't mean you diss somebody just for that, but I mean that any idea can be given to the group. And even if that idea, here's the thing, you imagine what it does to the energy in a room. That if this happened to me the other day, I was doing a talk at a big investment bank in the city, which I won't name, and this person went, Jonathan, and I said, yes. He said, Jonathan, I don't believe in this diverge, this stuff. It just doesn't work. I said, oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me why? I'm really interested in learning more. He said, well, I was in a meeting the other day. And I said, yes. And he said, I was in a meeting and somebody gave me, when we were doing this brainstorming, they gave me the wrong answer. And I said, that's super real, really interesting. They gave you the wrong answer. Now, categorically it was wrong. Moment's pause, where clearly he thought and he went, yes, it was wrong. And I said, okay, and so what did you do? And he went, and again, moment's pause, where I could see the reflection was beginning to happen. He went, oh, I said, you told them, didn't you? And he went, yes. And I said, what happened to the meeting? He said, oh, it died. And I went, yeah. And I suppose everyone crawled out, throwing smoke grenades to try to get out of the mess. And I said, what could you have done? And here's the difference. Yeah. He said, I could have shut up. And I said, no. Imagine if you had said, and if I hope you don't mind me role play with you, Mona. Imagine if you said, Mona, thank you for that thought starter. Thank you. Even though in your mind it's wrong, you thank Mona, the person who gave it to you, because it almost certainly triggered another thought in your mind. What does that do? What does that do to the energy in the room? Because you know there is going to be a time to do convergent thinking. And that because divergent thinking is always done separately, but it's balanced. It's polarity. It's yin and yang. You have that, and suddenly you transform places when nobody worries about putting their hand up and going, I've got an idea. Mm-hmm. Because if you're in divergent thinking, we want it. However good or bad it is, because all it is a building step for somebody else's thinking.
Yeah. And a brainstorming session by essence is supposed to be without judgment, accepting all ideas to be laid out at first. And to be frank, I haven't seen a brainstorming session led following the actual rules of brainstorming, which is non-judgmental, any idea that pops by, like nothing, refrain nothing, just say it all. Do not leave the room until everyone has literally vomited everything that they had to vomit about it. I've not seen that, because there is always that fear of judgment, or the judgment being present, or the comments that start sparking about it following that judgment. And I think in certain cases, it might trigger some lack of safety, which means that people are just going to shut up and not share their actual opinion. And I think it's also like the importance why I wanted to bring people from different backgrounds here, because I wasn't going to just put facilitators with each other and have someone mentioned to me recently a jerk circle. Like, that's very interesting, where you just hang out with people in the same space and we pat each other in the back. Yes, that's my definition of jerk circle. Think of it. Yes.
can I add one thing with just building on what you've said, Mona, about, you've never seen it. And the other thing is, I think you have to separate process from content. Yeah. So in any time that we're running any engagement, any meeting, and that can be the weekly status meeting, there is a view, and people can push back on this because it isn't universally held, but there's a view that if you are managing the process of a meeting and you are responsible for the content, by definition, you politicize the content. Yeah. Because if I then say, I think it's time to move on to the next topic, and you can all turn around. Well, there goes Jonathan again. Always, whenever we want to start talking about this, he just moves us on. Yeah. But if you have somebody who is neutral running the process, they can go, we've spent an awful lot of time on this topic. I have a sense from my plan that we need to move on. Is everybody aligned with that? Is everybody okay? Can I have a quick, And again, that's a super hack. Don't run your own meetings.
Having a moderator, assigning a moderator is something actually that I have seen like quite decent managers do, setting up someone within the team to actually run that weekly status. And it removes the pressure as well, I think, sometimes to have that, or even letting the team lead, giving the team the responsibility to lead that meeting on their own, has been like, quite the game changer. But it's something that actually is a good segue, because when Dave and I worked together, we had that opportunity to run our first facilitation experience together, with a bunch of our colleagues and managers, and we had like some C-levels attending, and it was very interesting to see a mixture of people getting together and really being vulnerable. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to share this experience before getting into facilitation. It's the reason why I'm into facilitation today, because I've seen what came out of that room. And when you come out of that room and you have people thanking you for changing their life, you're like, oh my God, I'm having a Tony Robbins moment. This is insane. But this wasn't new to you, Dave. Like, what made you so open to self-development and growth? And you had already like your own mindset set around change and transformation. What led you to it?
Yeah, I think most simply, anything I've ever done, I've wanted to do well. And that requires, I think, some specific things happening. So for me, I think I've always been pretty good about understanding realistically, without ego, like where I am in a competency level or a skill level with whatever it is I'm trying to do. Also, being open to the understanding of what good or great looks like within that activity or field. And then having the willingness to create a plan to close that gap of where I am to where I want to get to. And I think that's actually something really useful and simple that anyone can use to be open to learning and growing, no matter what it is. I think, approaching that with a framework and thinking about getting better at things and evolving and being resilient through the process. I think there are some key ingredients that like we all have to think about and remind ourselves when things get tough and when we're down and we're out of energy or we're not feeling very resilient. It's that openness, first of all, to where you are now. We've all seen and worked with or are related to perhaps some people that are very stubborn in their ways or very set in their ways, or they think that where they are is great and they don't need to change. I think that's, frankly, a really toxic opposite way of operating if you want to have a growth mindset, but you have to be open to where you are now. You also have to have resources. You have to know people, have access to information, seek or find opportunities that will allow you to grow and change and thrive. And then finally, like I mentioned with me in my journey, you have to have the willingness to do the work. You have to put in the inputs in order to get the output that you want. So for me, Mona, I think in summary, I've always wanted to do things well if I'm going to spend my time and effort applying it. And I think those kind of three principles have just kind of come naturally to me, thankfully. But it's all because of the work, and it's all because I found resources to help me along the way.
And it's true that when you mention resources, do you think about the resources that you seeked, or do you think as well of the opportunity that was given to you in your environment to be supported in this endeavor? Like, have you been able to rely on a positive work environment, for example, that would provide you with that support to develop yourself?
Yeah, totally. I think it's the choices that we make and the positions we put ourselves in and the information we seek out. To your question, I have definitely been in environments that have been super growth oriented. I think back to my time at a digital marketing and analytics company that I started at 10 years ago in Washington, D.C. called Track Maven. And we had a head of sales and eventual CRO come in, and he threw training resources at us. He had a consultant that he'd worked with for many years come in and taught us deal qualification tools when we're trying to articulate where we are as an account rep within a deal or renewing a deal or closing a deal. But we also got the opportunity to get one-on-one sessions with this coach and coaches within his network. And that's when I really had the ability to talk about the cool sales books that we wanted to read, the personal growth and development resources and workshops that I could attend to talk about some of these concepts. So again, I was very fortunate to be put in a work environment where the head of sales and one of the top executives in our company really promoted this idea of personal growth. Actually, one of the books that he literally bought for everyone in the company if they wanted it was The Growth Mindset. I think Carol Dweck, if I'm not forgetting, wrote it, and it's one of the best, most transformational books I've ever read. And stuff like that really has stuck with me. So yeah, I think to your point, Mona, being put into an opportunity or particularly a work environment where this type of stuff is not just encouraged but invested in is amazing.
I just wanted to kind of jump on the bandwagon of Dave because I resonate quite a lot with your experience and your understanding and sentiment around growth mindset. Because when I think back to an experience I had with a manager, and we were on a walk, very casual, very informal, and she said, what do you want to do? What's your purpose for being here? How can this job help you? And it was the first time I've actually sat down with a manager to, talk about my prospects and where I wanted to grow and what I wanted to do. And I was very frank, and I told her, look, I don't see myself being here for very long because I have other things that I want to pursue. And she was just like, okay, great. What do you need to develop whilst you're here that will then enable you to be where you want to be after you leave? And I think that's such a brilliant example of not only building a positive growth culture within the workplace, but it also made me feel really resilient. And, knowing the opportunities that would be handed to me, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a walk in the park because I'm growing, I'm learning. And I always believe that you have to become uncomfortable in order to get to where you want to be. And all that's to say is also understanding a sense of purpose. I think purpose, resilience, goals go together. And I think once you understand your purpose in life, once you understand where you want to go, you'll then be able to set goals accordingly, and then you'll be able to be adaptable. We talked about that word adaptable, flexibility, when it comes to resilience, and I think that's so important, because during that period where you are going through the different experiences to accomplish your goals, you are going to encounter a load of different things, and you have to be able to switch and adapt and be flexible as and when those things come. And it is in that process, and it's almost like you're in a machine being made to who you want to become and who you aspire to be. It is that processing that is where you build that resilience. It's where you build that confidence, that growth. And I think it's so important that companies embed and enable that into the cultures that they have, because it's not, you don't just go to work and leave. And I think for a long time, and being in organizations, it's like you do your work here, that's it. You go home, you have your own kind of personal life. And I think that's where a lot of people started to have side hustles, because they weren't being fulfilled in the workplace and work cultures that were, that they were in. And so we had a huge rush and increase in people doing things on the side to compensate for what they weren't getting. And I think those cultures weren't, to be frank, weren't building that sense of resilience for where they wanted to be in life.
And so if you were to meet a brand new founder, he's like, he or she or they, every time, like, I shoot myself in the foot with these. So someone building their business and scaling their business, the hardest challenge is how to maintain a great culture, because you can have like a group culture when you have 5 people, 10 people, 20, 50. As you scale and get over the hundreds, it's too much, right? So what strategies would you recommend this founder to set the foundation for success for, their scale up to grow with healthy roots, per se?
I think,
yeah.
So I think I came across this post literally just this week as I was kind of preparing for this conversation, and the person on LinkedIn mentioned that, and I made a note of it. They mention that we forget that trauma and anxiety doesn't go away despite how resilient someone may appear to be. And it's almost like we've forgotten how to be human. And I think if we look at new founders building a business, you have to bring in that humanistic element. Burnout is real, overworking is real. Being resilient doesn't mean you won't experience these things, but how do you approach these things in a healthy way where you can overcome them? And so for me, I have this acronym that I use for myself, for working with organizations in terms of this establishing this healthy culture, and I call it the WISE model. And W is for understanding your why. Why are you pursuing this business, and why do you want to have a positive working culture? What is it going to result to in the end? How is this going to benefit you, your employees, and the businesses and the business or clients that you work with? And then it's all about the I. How much are you willing to invest? And I think this is so key. A lot of companies want to have a positive working culture. They want to, attract the best of the best, but they don't want to put their money where their mouth is. And so you have to be willing to invest into your employees, invest into building a culture. Like Dave said, what training programs that you can provide, what resources you can provide to your employees to make sure that they're building that resilience, they're growing, because once they grow, your business also grows. It's a ripple effect. That's just life. And then you think about the strategy. So what's your mission statement? What's your approach in the workplace? How are you going to lay out the foundations of how people work together or how people work with their clients? And that, again, I'm going to link it back to something that we've discussed. How, how adaptable are you going to be in your strategy? Because a lot of businesses set out their strategies, their policies, and expect it to be fixed and rigid, and it's not going to change. But life isn't linear. So how adaptable, create an adaptable strategy that is vision led, that is impact focused, what your business aims to cultivate, not only inside the organization, but also outside. And then the E is all about execution with the employees, working with the employees, understanding what your employees are saying, understanding their challenges. If they are experiencing burnout, what are you going to do? Be very employee focused, but also execute on the word that you say. Don't just say, okay, we're going to introduce flexible working, and then 5 years down the line, everyone has to go back in the office, as we've seen. Like, it doesn't work like that. So being able to be quite employee focused and not just talk at them, but work with them. It's a collaborative approach. And I don't think, having a business, it's one-sided, because your employees are doing you a favor by coming to work and doing the work, but you're also providing, a living for them. It's a two-way street. You can't have one without the other. So you have to work together no matter what. And so for a new founder, by understanding that WISE model, and I significantly turned out to be wise, because I think that's the wise approach to establishing a culture the right way. And I think by undergoing those principles, by listening, and I love what Jonathan talked about, that creative problem solving, by embedding that into the business, it will be instrumental in getting the business to where it needs to be and growing and becoming more profitable ultimately.
Do you guys have views or strategies you'd recommend? Actually, Jonathan, do you see a difference between like companies who would book a workshop or working with your business to tick the box versus the ones who are actually wanting change?
I mean, I think most of the people who probably joined this talk are interested in resilience. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that people sort of self-select in. Not a lot of people come to a business like mine and go, there is a certain amount of self-awareness that they need help. We do get a bunch of people who come and go, we hear you do this thing with Lego, we want a, Lego serious play, and we go, and I'm always really worried about those, because they just think it's play, whereas in actual fact the emphasis should be on serious. It's a serious way of having a discussion. I mean, I think they were sort of taking a step back. I think there was something that Evelka said, which I thought is absolutely there. If you are, and going back to your actual question about how does a scaling entrepreneur build a team and build resilience into their business. And I think, having a clear sense of purpose, and I think, a lot of people know the Simon Sinek golden circle, being clear on the why beyond, making money. Because, jeepers, I'm a trustee of a charity in South London that works with some of the most disadvantaged, families. We need money. That's not our purpose, but we can't do the impact that we are doing with these families without getting money. So it really pisses me off when people go, our purpose is to make money. Have a proper purpose, because, and there's two models I'll give you that I think are absolutely, key. And the first is the work done by Desi and Ryan on, where they've done a lot of work around autonomy, competence and relatedness. And what they've shown, that in terms of those intrinsic, the people on teams that are given a clear task to do, but are then allowed to get on with it, they value autonomy. Now, what's interesting about autonomy is it's about, if you think on that hand, it's about me having the space to now get on with this job with you not standing over it. But the other thing that's absolutely key in their model, self-determination theory, is relatedness. I mean, you've got to remember, how long was it since we walked out of the Kenyan Rift Valley? 300,000 years, a sort of evolution. You know, we are social animals. If you weren't part of the, you know, if you were the one who was throwing hazelnuts at the rest of the tribe as you moved through, you know, they told you to piss off and the saber-toothed tiger ate you last night. You know, we like being part of people. I mean, I think resilience, there's a whole evolutionary biology story in here as well, which I love, is that so much of the way we react today is that we've evolved so bleeding quickly. We still go around, someone bumps into us in the tube, and we go we give a sort of reaction as if they were a saber-toothed tiger, and we sort of go to stab them, and you go, they just bumped into you into the tube. But we're so sort of wired to all of these threats. And I'm not downplaying that people find it difficult, but trust me, yeah, it ain't what it was like 150,000 years ago, where basically every night you wanted to know whether you were getting up in the morning. Yeah, there's still loads of people around the world that face that, but for the majority of us, there's that. But the next thing was relatedness. People want to feel connected. So how are you going to allow your teams? How are you, when you're growing super fast and you may be doubling the amount of people in your business every 6 months? How do you keep that going? You know, and again, brilliant book to read, Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point. If you haven't read that book, all about, you know, huge amount of research that shows when you go over 150 people, boom, everything changes. And isn't it Gore, the fabric, the performance fabric? They will never have a factory of more than 150 people. Consultants all over the world keep going to Gore and go, merge all your factories. And they go, no, we want them at 150 people. Yeah. All they do is build another factory till it gets to 150 people, because 150 people know each other. But it's not just about being nice to each other. It could be, Dave, mate, you've been late to work for the last 3 shifts, and we can't get that line going because you're on machine number 1. Yeah. And Dave goes, okay, sorry, team, because Dave cares. Yeah. And then the other one, which again, I think both Dave and Navalka have spoken very passionately about, is competency. You know, are you giving your people the skills to do their job? Both, I think, the technical skills, yeah, which I think are absolutely. Do I know how to sell this product? Do I know how to use this CRM or whatever it, you know, are you giving them those skills? But then are you also giving them those broader sort of life skills, you know, a way of, which is where I jump in. I can't teach you any technical how to run a CRM, but I can give you that much broader set, do this, then do that, don't do them together, etc., etc. And when you take autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and you're really deliberate about those, then I think you give people an environment where they can flourish, because they feel connected, they feel I'm getting the skills to do this job, they don't mind being pushed because it's supportive. And then what was interesting, I mean, I think Ryan and Desi wrote their first paper back in about 2000 around sort of self-determination theory. And then along came, I don't know if you've come across Google's Project Aristotle, where they tracked about 180 high-performing teams for over 2 years. And they looked at hard measures, do we bring our projects in on time, under budget, and soft measures, do I like being on this team? And the number one immutable was psychological safety. If you, Google go as far as saying, if you do not have psychological safety, in Google's definition of high performing, you can't be it. Yeah. And so when I did a talk yesterday to a bunch of people, and one of the things I said is, if you asked your team on a scale of 1 to 5, do I feel safe offering an idea or an opinion to my team without fear or ridicule? 1, no. 5, absolutely. See what happens. Yeah, because that's the number one score. But there were a couple of other things that Google, which again ties all of this together, which Google said is, Dependability, this idea that we hold each other to account. Gore keeping their factories to 150 because you know everybody. Structure and clarity. Do I know what I'm doing? Do I know what does my work have meaning? My work, me personally, and does the team's work have meaning? And are we doing impactful work? So isn't it interesting, of the top of 5, 2 of those are about, do I actually care about what I'm doing? And I think I don't know, no, I'm not an expert on resilience, but I do think that when people, are passionate about what they do, they will put up with more pain. And again, I know I go back a lot to sort of, I suppose, military. Someone said the other day, Jonathan, all you ever talk about is sort of wars and stuff. But I mean, the point is that so much learning has come out of looking at how the armed services do. But, what do you get paid in the British Army as a squaddie? 22,000 quid? And I think you only get your dental for free when you're actually on the front line. If you're sitting here in a barracks, you pay for your own bleeding dental. So, you've got to have something that makes those young men and women go, I'm going to do this. I tell you one thing, they're not bloody doing it for the money. Yeah. So those are the 2 things I would go to. I think for me, there is something really powerful about having some frameworks that you can start going, how are we doing autonomy? How are we doing competencies? And that might be the HR and the learning director. What are we doing about relatedness? How are we bringing people? And I think the other bit might be, and then I'll shut up and let Dave have a go, but I think the relatedness is not just internal. It is also with other stakeholders. What about our clients? Are we working with clients that, we really want to work with? Do they have the same values as we do?
Yeah. That is a very important point, especially for client-facing people and teams. How does that resonate with you, Dave?
A lot. I mean, everything I've heard, I'm learning myself and getting a different perspective. So I love the conversation. I think a point that has been brewing in my head the last 10 minutes is really the fact that, hard things are hard. I'll take my experience as an example. Like, I'm in sales. Like, people shouldn't be in sales if rejection or no is something that just ruins their day or ruins them for a long time. Pick your role, pick your company, pick your industry, whatever it might be. We all have to get done and a goal to achieve in the work life, and we're all different. So I think we really need to contextualize what we each need within all of those factors that I just mentioned. But the reality is that hard stuff is hard. So I think saying that, accepting it, talking about it with your peers and your boss, at least from my experience in sales, is a really, really healthy way to, I guess, kind of just accept that what you're doing and the kickback that you get, the mud in your face that you're going to get in this position and in this role, is going to be not great sometimes. And if there's an acceptance about that, it really takes a lot of the stress away from, at least for me, takes a lot of the stress away from failure, from being tired, from, insert not so great emotion into the mix. It makes taking all those punches a lot easier.
Yeah.
And do you know, Dave, where I see that every 4 years is when I watch the Olympics and the Paralympics. And you sit there, you watch those athletes, and most of them have been training for 4 years. This is not just a year. This is, I got up every day for 4 years and went rowing, or you fill in the blank. And I was in Paris. I went, I think it is the most extraordinary example of grit and graft and having a goal. And how many times do you hear these people going, and I was having to hold down a job doing this and this and this, and the fame only comes and the glory only comes the day that they sit or stand. You know, there's very little payback while they're doing that, and yet extraordinary.
Yeah. You mentioned, we talked a lot about the connections in the belongings and the nurturing that psychological safety and processes and having a space to keep each other accountable. But how do you think we should keep leaders accountable, especially for poor management practices or for practices that are not really advisable?
I think that's one of the reasons you have boards. Yeah. And you have, and I think, again, if you are a fast scaling, going back to your question, if you're a fast scaling entrepreneur, and you're beginning to get given money by investors and stuff, I think part of your responsibility is employing a group of non-execs that will hold you to account. Not that you can bully and tell to piss off as soon as they go, we don't particularly like what you're doing. Get the talent that will help you do a better job and hold you to account.
What do you guys think?
I also think what I don't see enough of is regular check-ins with leaders. I think leaders have a lot of leeway in terms of, like Jonathan rightly said, not having that board or non-exec. If you don't have that in your business, you have nothing to keep you accountable. You have nothing to understand what you're doing wrong. In their eyes, they probably think that's the way that a business is run. They don't know any better. And I think there is an understanding of checking in, having that checkpoint with employees, but also with external people, media moderators, whoever it may be, to really say, okay, this is going wrong in my business. I don't know why. And being really upfront and really aware of the problems in your organization, and questioning, I don't know why this is happening, and let someone guide you through that process. Because I've seen a lot of leaders say the wrong things and not actually having the proper checks and balances in place to support those that they've hurt and to rectify the situation. And I also think there needs to be stricter measures in place for when complaints are raised against leaders. I think the HR system, and some people may not agree, but the HR system is there to protect the business at the end of the day. And that's all it is. So when a complaint is raised against a really senior leader, one, it takes too long. Secondly, it's not taken seriously enough. And thirdly, it's kind of wiped under the carpet, and until there is multiple complaints, until it's a big issue, until it's a public issue, that's when they decide, actually, oh crap, we actually need to sort this out, or else our business is going to go under because of the reputational damage that it's going to have. So I think there needs to be stricter measures from the get-go when complaints are raised, when poor practices are alerted. And then there needs to be proper checks and balances from externals. I am tired of seeing internals trying to sort out an internal situation. It's not going to work. There's only going to be bias fueled over and over. And if it's the same people dealing with the same problem, then clearly it's a problem. That's a red flag in itself. So I do think there needs to be stricter measures and processes in place and better checks and balances within organizations by external stakeholders.
Harrods, anybody?
Harrods?
Well, I think would you go shopping at Harrods at the moment?
Oh, Harrods. You got to explain this stuff to me, Jonathan. I'm an American.
Okay.
We don't have those over here.
There's no Harrods where I'm at, but all the
Okay.
malls are super cool.
It's all over our news that a previous owner, and so we don't all get sued, but a previous owner of Harrods, probably, 200 women have now come forward saying that they were from as bad as being raped to, and inappropriate behavior. And that were, you had I think you put it, like a very, Afayed was supported by an organization that enabled him to do that. You can't be a CEO and do that much damage to that many women without having structures that are enabling you to do it. And it is lost for words. But again, I do think it'll be interesting. I did mean to cycle down and see whether the queues are any shorter at the moment outside Harrods, because they bloody well ought to be.
Yeah, I think to your point, Jonathan, from a consumer perspective, if you're shopping at a department store or an employee at a company, there is power in knowing that we as individuals and employees, if you're lucky enough and have the resources to, we can leave, we can go somewhere else. So I think the onus and responsibility is on us in many ways to choose the right environment that we want to be in. That to me is something that we can't forget.
Yeah. Can I? There's something else that you said. You said it earlier, and I thought it is such an important point, David. I wouldn't mind you did it. Said it again there. It's about the resources we have, and I do think there is something very interesting in that. Is the more resources you have, and that could literally be well for the community. Probably it is easier to put up with adversity. Yeah. So if you are independently wealthy because you've got parents or grandparents who set you up a trust fund, it is probably easier to walk away from a toxic job than if it's your only job. And I do think that we have to really consider that I think that there are levels in terms of that whole environment that allows certain people to appear more resilient, but often it is inherited, an inherited safety net that has given them that privilege, which and for me that it's something that I am very, very conscious of. That there are certain people who it is easier for than other people, and I think that's a hugely important job for all of us to do, is to make sure that we're not just how do we make sure that everybody has that opportunity, that it cascades down to the people with with the least.
You see, I think sharing experiences and different opportunities is one way to open up these opportunities. Actually, I'm just repeating myself here, but because you only know what you know. So if you're conditioned by your environment, your social background, and that's all you only know one way is to power through the shit that is thrown at you and keep your head down, because you don't have any other choice, because it's hard to find another job, because it's tough to go and you stick with that toxic environment, but you don't know what the alternative is, and you don't know what else you could do. Some people don't even know that there is a grievance process that they can put forward, even if that process is actually a mindfuck in some situations. It is still there and available, and you can still have some free resources to help you out with that. But there is a fear because we don't communicate enough about these things. And I think sharing the examples that there are cases where you might not have certain privilege, but there are avenues that you can explore. And you mentioned like some people having like side hustles, just getting to know what type of side hustles you can have, or how can you get help, affordable mental health support, for example, because there are more systems and there are non-profits that are out there to help. There are so many people I know, and some of you guys might get involved with pro bono work with like charities, and like there is a web of different things that can be done. But then resilience is touching in the day to day. So I had someone from the audience who've submitted like a case. They've written an article about scheduling emails and be like, I refuse to schedule emails. I'm honest. If I'm sending something at 2 a.m., it's 2 a.m. and so be it. You don't have to answer. It's not your responsibility to answer at 2 a.m. So why should I have to hide when I'm working just so you don't get your trigger at that time? And that everyone is responsible for how they manage their time, right? And it has caused quite the stir, as you can imagine, because some people are like, no, my time is my time. Don't send me an email at 2 a.m. Some people are like, turn your notifications off. This kind of conversations are a conversation that can happen in any company. What are your thoughts about that? That's like a prime case study that we can like break down. Like, do we need a system and a culture that tells people, well, you're responsible for your time. Don't feel obliged to answer to emails after 7 p.m. Is that at the organizational level, or is that everyone needs to adult themselves? How do we handle that?
I think it's an individual preference, and it goes back to communication. If I am emailing Jonathan at 2 a.m. and Jonathan then comes back to me and say, actually, I would prefer if you don't send emails at this time, then I would avoid sending emails at that time. But I think it's also, it's a conversation and a sense of communication you must have. I also had this debate with a close friend of mine as well, in terms of I'm one of those people that schedule emails during working hours because I don't want people to know that I'm working at crazy o'clock, and don't want that fear of notification. Oh my God, they're thinking, what the hell is happening? So we did have this conversation, but I think the more I dwell on it, the more I'm understanding that it is a conversation. If someone says, I would prefer not to, you're not crossing a boundary. Now, I think we all, well, those, Dave, I don't know if you've seen, but there was a case where this young girl who worked with a huge consultancy firm, I'm not going to name the firm, that sadly passed away due to being overworked, and her parents were very much saying that it was the working culture that caused her to work crazy hours, commit so much of herself that she lost herself and ultimately physically lost herself in this world. And I think there needs to be a balance, and I talk a lot about not so much balance, but more harmony in terms of how things work with each other. We talk, about that work-life balance, and, some people believe in it, some people don't. And I think that's a whole debated topic in itself. But I think with communication, with direction and understanding people's differences of work, some people prefer to work at night, some people prefer to work during the day, and it's understanding those differences and having those open conversations about what kind of working environment do you feel more fulfilled by, or where you think you can be your best self at what point of the day. If it's 2 a.m., it's 2 a.m. If it's 8 a.m., it's 8 a.m. But I think there needs to be some sort of dialogue to understand how best to position. And I have to say this, like, no organization is ever going to get this right. It's a work in progress. But I think once you go down via your team levels and stuff and have those conversations, we'll probably get to a point where we're a little bit more understanding, we're a little bit more receptive when situations like emails out of hours do arise.
Jonathan, you seem to have a burning thought.
Yeah, listen, I'm 57. I didn't get my first phone until I was working. I'd been working. I still remember getting it in Hong Kong. I got a brick, an analog Ericsson brick. So I didn't grow up, as a digital native. What I don't, I truly don't get, the bit I don't get is if I send an email at midnight because I've suddenly woken up and gone, I've had an idea, boom, and I sort of get it down. The tech exists on all of these now. You don't need to look at the email, till you're working hours. And I think that's part of a conversation. So tell me, again, I might be about to get myself into deep trouble, is the fact that it's triggering for some people just the fact that I sent it at midnight, even though they don't read it till 9 o'clock when they switch? Is that, and in which case, I do struggle to understand that. I just struggle to comprehend. I don't read my emails till 9 o'clock. Yeah, but don't frigging get triggered by the fact that I just want to send it at 2 o'clock. I really, please, if there's anybody out there listening, tell me why I'm wrong and help me understand. Having said that, I do think you had some really interesting points in there. That my wife's worked, there is a point to this. My wife's worked for HSBC for years. She's an economist, and every quarter she has to write a very big report. And for the first time in ages this quarter, we had something in the diary and we went away for the weekend. And she came back. She didn't work at all over the weekend. And she came back and finished the report. She went to press last night and she's been doing the news rounds today. But she did say that it was interesting. She actually feels it was better for having that. And I said, does that now mean we're going to get that weekend? Because 4 times a year, we know we don't see mother, wife for, that weekend. It's got, she's up here working. And so I do think there is something about reminding people that sometimes, for her, having 2 days by the beach, swimming in the English Channel, with her sister who she's really close with and all of that, she was probably still processing. Back here, she was probably going, okay, yeah, that's what the brain does. Did she end up writing a better report because she did take the time? And I think that, by the way, I think is a really interesting thing, that how do we make sure that we get the best out of this bunch of synapses up here? And there is a lot of research that shows stepping away from a problem doesn't mean that we don't keep, we are still processing. So, and sometimes when we keep it here, we don't do anything but just keep looking at it and going back. So I'm also slightly giving a counter argument to myself that there is something about a culture which allows people reflective time to go, to go. And I've stopped drinking, and, I had a pretty, and for me, and, I now do a huge amount of exercise, and it is really interesting because I think I am now more resilient. If I look at my, my life at the moment, and I've not gone completely sober, but I think my app tells me I have 1 glass of wine about a month at the moment. So it is pretty, and it is interesting because before I would quite often come back 3-4 times a week and have a glass of wine. That was a way of me coping. And I do think we're well into the, we haven't got long to go, but I think there is also some stuff about resilience, about things like diet, things like exercise, when we are, standing up, and going for a walk in your office and not just sitting at your desk for 6 hours straight, getting that 5 minutes every hour where you get, all of those, interestingly, I think are hugely important ways of building resilience, because physiologically, our body can cope with cortisol better when we're fitter, and again, it comes down to evolutionary. I mean, so much of this, isn't it? It is a biology lesson. How do we, the Amy Cuddy, the power pose, you do, you stand like this for a minute, you change the chemistry in your body. Biology. So I know it's well into this talk, but I think there's something really interesting. Again, what can we do to make sure that our work environments, especially when people are working remotely, that we're still providing that sort of an environment that allows people to not just think of this, but to think of that.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's one thing about resilience. When we talk about resilience in the workplace, we're directly drawn into self-development and looking at how mindset. And every time something that's really, really close to my heart, every time we talk about resilience and people put it in perspective with like pushing through, that like is like just like chalk on a like resilience is not pushing through. Resilience is that flexibility, that capacity to adjust and learn and grow. And it's actually being able to say that, well, learning to take a break for a weekend is actually a beautiful resilience story for me. Because that resilience isn't pushing through and taking more calls during that weekend. Resilience is knowing to adjust for a result, appreciating that journey a little better, and making sure that, yeah, you're still focused on your goal, but you're actually maintaining your precious resource and taking care of it. Taking care of your health is an important component. When you're asking people and you're making it a norm in the company to work after hours, is that in alignment with your health? So that leads me to like a crucial question, because as much as resilience is close to me and to my heart, of course, is this trend to push people to take responsibility for themselves just a way for companies to avoid addressing like these core systemic issues like burnout and overwork, and actually processes that are not operationally like set up correctly to allow people to have that time? What do you think about it?
I don't think they're avoiding the issue. I just think they don't know that the issue exists. Because they've been in this environment that, it's work, work, work. And then you go home and then all of a sudden you automatically switch off. And I think that's where we saw a lot of people struggling working from home when COVID first hit. We had a lot more cases, and still do to this day growing cases around mental health and well-being. And all of a sudden the tune shifted to, what can we do? Go outside, take a walk, and everyone was all about that. But they didn't realize it was an issue until it became real, until it became front in their face, when we had to all stop working in the office and actually had to take a step and pause which is something that we probably hadn't done in decades. So I don't think it's a sense of totally avoiding the issue. I just think there is a lack of understanding, there's a lack of acknowledgement around it, and also a lack of understanding about psychological safety, which I know we touched on in this discussion. I don't think many people have been clued up, or many organizations are clued up what psychologically safety is and what a fluid sense of work-life balance is. Because if we really understood, we wouldn't be reverting back to going 5 days in an office after we saw what it's like working from home. I maybe because I'm coming from a generation where I did feel that shift. I started working in the office and then all of a sudden working from home, and now we're working back into the office after you said that actually, things are going quite well, remote working, we've established what that's going to look like. And now all of a sudden it's shifted again, and it's just like everyone back in the office. I don't care, flexibility, that's kind of out of the door now. I just think there is a lack of understanding and a lack of, not even a lack of, but people aren't taking it as serious, as I think it should be. It's kind of like and I talk about this in an inclusion world, everything kind of shot up after the George Floyd murder happened, and now we're kind of going back to the way things were. So it's like we kind of go in this kind of fluctual stage of, yep, this is what we should do. And then all of a sudden, oh, actually, we're better off what we were doing before. It actually worked before, so we might as well do this. And then another incident or situation pops up that makes you realize, oh, crap, we need to deal with this situation. And I think that's kind of the same trend I've seen throughout the years.
Can you see a difference, Dave, on your end when it comes like from the inside?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think every organization is unique. There's by definition, because there are a different group of people within them, and there are different people that created that company and the culture, and there are people actively contributing to seeing that culture live and breathe through. I think that I don't think that this concept of resilience is necessarily masking the fact that there are these systemic changes that companies have that, or the systemic parts of them, I should say, that aren't ever going to change. But it certainly could be the case, right? I think due to the fact that every company is different, just makes it all depend on that company. I've certainly been at places where at times culture was toxic, not necessarily from the top down, but from kind of a groundswell effect. Too much gossip, too many, people talking behind other teams' backs and individuals' backs, which led to a lot of disharmony and a culture where people never really felt safe. And it's hard to be resilient in an organization, an environment where you don't feel safe. On the other hand, I've been at companies where people are very open and honest about their challenges, about what they need from each other, what they need from their boss and from the head of the function. And I think if that type of honesty is not only allowed but supported, I think that'll certainly be the most realistic and positive foundation for there to be actual acceptance and encouragement to be resilient. I don't know if any of that was articulate or not, but
No, that makes sense. That makes actually that makes absolute sense. So overall, like I think what we've covered, I'm conscious of time here, um, is that there are different frameworks and theories that companies can put in place. So keep in mind to nurture that. There's a caveat when it comes from the theory to the reality. Exactly like in meetings, for example, the need to moderate is something that we need to do for people, but in meetings, but also in everything in our lives, finding that middle ground and that moderation. But it's also on a case by case basis. So it will be in maybe the specific situation, or maybe a specific organization, or a specific team, or the different type of people that are going to be there, because they're all going to be unique. There are going to be some differences in how you will nurture that psychological safety as well within different groups. Um, it has been super interesting to have you guys still, and it goes super fast. People don't believe me when I say, you know what, an hour and a half it seems long, but it goes like this. Um, do you guys have anything burning that you'd like to share or leave our audience with before I wrap things up? I'll do a
Just
little
believe.
countdown.
I think resilience is also just believing in yourself, and focusing on your goal, your mission, your purpose, whatever it may be, and forging your path, and not letting anyone get in your way, and take time to rest and recuperate, because that is needed for you to continue on your journey. So just continue to believe in yourself, and give yourself grace.
Well said.
Well said.
Awesome. We're closing this circle jerk now. We have been patting each other on the back. And no, thank you. Thank you so much for the audience. I hope this has been insightful. Another beautiful pieces of resilience stories. Thanks for sharing your own perspectives and your own experiences. There's no such thing as a resilience expert. I think because resilience is in the process of this journey where we grow and we learn along the way. And I'm super grateful for you guys, super grateful for the audience. Thanks for your participation, your support. Please do subscribe, share, like, interact with our speakers, go follow them, add them, brainstorm ideas, ask them any questions you'd like. I'm just like trying at you more work, guys. So, so please network, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. And you guys, thank you so much. I'm going to end.